Okay, so picture this. It's the world right after World War II, and the global map basically looks like two massive puzzle pieces. You've got the West, led by the U.S., all about capitalism and spreading their ideas, and on the other side, there's the East, dominated by the Soviet Union, pushing for communism. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Two distinct camps. But fast forward to today, and things look way more complicated. The Soviet bloc, gone. America's position at the top, definitely being challenged. And you've got these rising powers like China really changing the game. You sent us this really thought-provoking YouTube transcript, and it got us thinking hard about the big question. Who is going to be calling the shots in the world in the coming years?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? And this deep dive is all about understanding China's ambition to become the leading global power, how the U.S. might react to that, and what role everyone else plays in this whole shifting balance of power. Your source, it really gives us some important historical context for how we got here.
It's almost crazy to think that it was only about 40 years ago that we were stuck in the Cold War. This massive ideological battle between the U.S. and the USSR. I mean, it lasted for decades, finally ending in December 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. And for a while there, it really did feel like the U.S. was the undisputed superpower.
That period in the 90s, it's often called the unipolar moment. Basically, it means one nation holds a ton of power and influence. In this case, it was the U.S. after the Soviet Union was out of the picture. Feeling like the only superpower left standing, the U.S. really took on the role of, well, they saw themselves as the world's policemen. And their 1998 National Security Strategy document actually emphasizes that directly. It talks about the need for the U.S. to be ready to respond to threats.
Wait, hold on. Respond to threats both domestically and internationally. That's a pretty broad statement, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. At home and abroad, that's a pretty bold claim. And they weren't just talking. We saw the U.S. military getting involved in a bunch of places during the 90s. Somalia in 92, Bosnia in 95, Kosovo in 99. Often they said it was to promote democracy.
Okay, so they were actively intervening around the world, promoting democracy. But if you look back, the results seem pretty mixed.
Right. Like in Haiti in 1994, U.S. intervention actually did help bring back a democratically elected president, Aristide. But then you have cases like Egypt, where the U.S. was heavily invested in supporting Mubarak's regime, which wasn't exactly a model of democracy.
So it seems like their actions weren't always aligned with their stated goals.
Well, the source points out that in the case of Egypt, it wasn't really about promoting democracy. It was more about protecting U.S. interests, specifically securing the Suez Canal, which is a vital waterway for global trade. Something like 15% of it goes through there. So even when the U.S. seemed all-powerful, their actions were often driven by strategic interests that sometimes went against their supposed ideals.
And then everything changed with 9/11, right? It was the early 2000s. And this attack, it wasn't just on American soil. It felt like an attack on the very idea of the global order that the U.S. had been leading. Suddenly, the U.S. was totally united in launching the war on terror, going after al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and pretty quickly toppling the Taliban.
And what's really interesting is that while 9/11 initially brought the U.S. together, it also laid the groundwork for some of the problems we see today. President Bush's axis of evil doctrine, naming North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, it really signaled a shift to a more confrontational approach to foreign policy.
Which brings us to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, right? Yeah. They said it was about weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, but as we all know now, that turned out to be false. What stands out to you about this whole period?
Well, if we look at the bigger picture, the Iraq War, it was a huge turning point. The fact that some of the U.S.'s usual allies, like France and Germany, didn't support the invasion, it showed that there was growing skepticism internationally towards the U.S. acting alone. The wars that followed in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were incredibly costly. A lot of American lives were lost, not to mention the financial burden. And as a result, people both within the U.S. and around the world started seriously questioning whether all this U.S. intervention was really a good idea. The source also mentions that the U.S. was relying heavily on sanctions during this time, often targeting those axis of evil countries we talked about.
Yeah, from 2000 to 2019, the U.S. imposed almost as many sanctions as the EU, the UN, and Canada put together. Really gives you a sense of a superpower using its economic power as a major tool. But it seems like this approach might have backfired in some ways.
Yeah, and that's a crucial point. This interventionist approach, the heavy use of sanctions, it arguably contributed to a rise in anti-American sentiment globally. Many countries felt like the U.S. was too quick to interfere in their affairs. And as the U.S.'s dominance started to look less certain, another big player was stepping onto the world stage, China.
And China's rise has been incredible. After Mao Zedong died in 1976, they totally changed direction. opening up to the world and becoming this gigantic manufacturing hub.